Alright, today we will be tearing down a 2002 Grizzly 660 motor. We're going to start by taking the head off. There's probably 15 or so Allen bolts that we're going to have to remove. And I loosened them up to save a little bit of time. Intake valve cover off. There'll be more Allens under here. You'll want to loosen up the cam chain tensioner before you take this completely off so you don't cause any damage. And a lot of times you can just take the two Allen bolts out here and that'll give you enough slack in the chain to pull this cover off. This motor apart because there was some crankshaft rod noise, kind of notorious for the Grizzly 660 and the Raptor 660. There is an oil line right here. We'll have to pull this bolt off before we can take this cover completely off. These have 5 valves, 3 intake and 2 exhaust. Pull that oil line off. There'll be a crush washer on each side of this. There's an Allen head, you won't be able to see it, but an Allen down here that kind of holds this line into place. So if you take this Allen bolt off, that'll allow you to move that oil line out of the way. I'm going to take this oil line completely off so we're not breaking it. Take a 17 and knock that loose. This is coming right off the oil filter here, and then it goes down into the bottom end. These crush washers you want to replace every time. You don't want to reuse those. Now I should be able to lift this head off of here. Sometimes that camshaft will have enough pressure on it to have to wiggle a little bit to get it off. Make sure all these are completely loose. Alright, and then that is off there. Try to keep all those Allen heads in place, that way we know where they are going back together. We have the cam in there, there's the 3 intake valve and the 2 exhaust. Got 4 12mm bolts holding the head on. First we'll finish pulling this tensioner out of here, that way there's no pressure on that cam chain. With that, 2 Allens, and that'll allow that camshaft to move a little more freely. A lot of times have enough room to get that camshaft or the cam chain off of there. I just lifted up the back of the cam, and that allowed me to sprocket to go down in order to get that off. Now if you're just rebuilding the top end, you want to keep that chain up. We're gonna take it all the way down to the cases, so I'll just let that drop. You don't want to turn the motor. When it's down there, it'll bind down in the bottom end. You could break your case. So now we're gonna pull the head off. Four-cylinder head bolts here. Then you'll want to torque these down when you start putting it back together. That way you have the right amount of torque on these bolts so the gasket will seal good. There's the cylinder head bolts there. 4 of those, and there's several Allens around the edges here. One here. I'm going to take this intake manifold off here. There's 4 Allens holding this on. This goes directly to the carburetor, and this boot is directional. It'll only go on one way. Here is a water temperature sensor there. You have your thermostat inside of there. Take these bolts off. Just give it a tap. There's 2 O-rings inside there. You'll want to replace those 2 when you go back together. Alright, to get the head off, there's a 12mm bolt under here. And then same thing on this side. So you want to make sure you take those loose before you try prying that head off. And these will be torqued down as well. Pull that bolt off there, and I'm going to put that with the head bolts. Now your head's going to be ready to come off. There's an Allen here that we already took off. You want to take this water line, this little hose, I'm going to take that off. That just comes off there with a clamp. You want to do your best not to use a screwdriver in there to damage that surface there. Cam chain guide right here. That'll just pull out. Now when you're putting this back in, there's a little area here where this cam chain guide will sit. So you want to make sure that goes all the way down in there. We're going to put this with the cam chain tensioner. And those will be sold together. If you're buying it used, if you're buying it new, they'll be individual. And that head is off. You see there, 2 exhaust valve, 3 intake. There's that water pump sensor there, that temperature sensor. And you can see down in here what that piston looks like. Piston's turned sideways in there. So what we'll do now is take these cylinder head bolts off, 4 of those, and then a couple Allens around the edges. There's a water line here that'll have to come off as well before we pull that cylinder off. So you can do that one of 2 ways. These 2 Allen head bolts here, or take this hose off, this hose clamp, the Phillips screwdriver hose clamp. But these bolts will be torqued as well. They're a 14mm bolt. And these are quite a bit tighter. Alright, now those are off. We'll take the Allens off around the edges. 2 Allens on the cam chain side. These are a little bit longer than the head bolts. That cylinder should just slide off. Now that piston's in there sideways, so we might have a difficult time getting that out.